This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
I was holding a musket in Joe Coffee. I did an article that's actually now my next book, that I am going to live by the Constitution as literally as possible. I'm the year of living constitutionally. So
okay, but you were holding a musket in Starbucks. Now the Constitution doesn't require; it allows for people to have muskets, but it doesn't require you to have a musket.
But I want to express all of my rights as much as I can. So it's all about expressing my rights as the Constitution writes them.
But the only reason I hone in on this is, like, I didn't vote, and people tell me, "Oh, people died for your right to vote." That's the common response, and it's in the Constitution to vote is another response. And I say the Constitution gives me the right to vote. It also gives me the right to not vote.
That is true. Yeah, it surprisingly does not talk much about voting in the Constitution, mostly because they wanted to restrict it to white males who own property. And which you are, a white male. But actually, Jews were not allowed to vote in Maryland until 1828. So there you go. Really? You're lucky you didn't live in Maryland.
Now, was it Jews specifically, or was it just, white Protestant men?
Jews, Catholics, but they specifically banned it in the state constitution. The Jews, Catholics, Turks, and one other group that they didn't like.
What about Egyptians?
They can probably. I'm sure they were welcome to vote.
Or Hindus? Did Hindus vote in Maryland in 1827?
I don't know. I'm not sure how many there were, but it's a good question. I'm going to look into it for you. How are you, James? What's going on?
A lot of stuff, actually, but I want to hear more about the musket. Now, here's the other question I have, because
wait, is this on air or just
yeah, this is recording.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, I can't talk much more about it without my publisher yelling at me, because they said you cannot talk about it again until the book comes out. So,
well, let me just ask you this.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to hold a musket even if it doesn't work? Like, even if it's like
yes. There are I looked into this because I didn't want to get arrested. You can hold a musket is considered an antique unless it has the lead balls and the gunpowder on it, and then it becomes a firearm, and then you can get arrested. Now, I do have the lead balls, but I don't have the gunpowder, because the place that I called for antique gunpowder, you need antique gunpowder, that had blown up. They said, yeah, our factory blew up, so call back in a few months. So I'm still waiting.
What's an antique? Does it have to be a certain number of years old?
That's a good question. I don't know but this one, I bought it online at like antiquesmusket.com, and it is from constitutional times. It's like 1789 musket. It's hardcore. It was it was used in the War of 1812. It might have, who knows what it did, but it's a piece of history.
Because the reason I ask is I know someone, I won't say who, someone who may or may not be on this podcast, who has what is it, like an anti-missile like bomb thrower or whatever, like a bazooka kind of thing from the Gulf War. So I wonder if that's considered an antique.
I'm not sure that qualifies, but I'll look into it.
It's all hollowed out though. Like, it's impossible for it to work. But
yeah, well, that's what. I mean, my mom is like, you can't have a gun in the house. I'm like, Mom, it would take me about 14 hours to load the musket, to figure out how to load it, to get the gunpowder. Like, I'll tell you, like this, this coffee mug right here is more dangerous than that musket. Real guns, yeah, that can be dangerous in the house, but a musket from 1789, I'm okay with it.
So, okay, so we won't talk anymore. That's your next book. When's your next book coming out?
It'll be out in early 2024. So
A little over a year.
Little over a year. I know it's the year of living constitutionally, and I literally don't even have a year to live it. It's like the 11 months of living constitutionally. So this is
what's
the
one more
fastest.
thing like what's one other weird amendment that you have to like live by?
Well, one I'm excited about is I'm actually working on this now because, the Third Amendment, number 3, this is top 3 amendment is that you are not allowed to, that troops cannot be quartered in your apartment or house without your permission, which was a big deal back in the 1770s. The British would just, their soldiers would just come in and, eat you out of house and home, and they were rude apparently, and they were horrible. So, but I want to express my constitutional right to house soldiers as long as I give consent, because that's what it says in the amendment. You can house soldiers, but only if you give consent. So right now I'm interviewing people in the military to see who will make the best house guest so that they can come and stay at my house for a couple of days and I can quarter some soldiers.
That is really funny. I think this is going to be a great book on par with The Art of Living Biblically, your first classic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this one is I consider it, this is the sequel. That's the way I sort of conceived it, as the sequel. And since the Constitution is super timely, and most people, aside from Donald Trump, who says we should get rid of it, it is considered the founding document of our country. So I can't wait.
It's interesting because what's the history of the Constitution in the sense that it's like you say, it's the founding document. I think it's like one of the oldest current government documents or constitutions of a country right now, right? Are there any constitutions that are older in the world?
I think this is it. I mean, there's the the Magna Carta, which I guess you could consider, but yeah, no, it is because other countries often go through multiple constitutions over the decades. And this one is hanging in there. It's hanging in there for 200.
Again, this falls under the A.J. Jacobs process. I once wrote about your writing process, and we did a podcast about it. Let me see if I can find it right now. Because this is like the formula for a bestseller, the A.J. Jacobs formula for a bestseller. And so basically, here's what I have. You pick a high stakes idea. So for instance, religion, health, gratitude, knowledge. These are high stakes, very broad ideas. You put yourself in the story. So you don't just write, like I've interviewed people who have written about the Constitution and explained the Constitution. That's not what you're doing. You're putting yourself in the story, and it's through your story that we're able to understand. Like for instance, you didn't just write about the Encyclopedia Britannica and about encyclopedias and storing knowledge. You read the Encyclopedia Britannica from A to Z in your book, The Know-It-All, which is one of my favorites. And part 3 is you go extreme. So like you don't just read a few things in the encyclopedia. You don't say this is the 30 weirdest things in the encyclopedia. You read the entire encyclopedia. you live for a year biblically. Like you take it to the absolute. You don't just have gratitude for coffee. You go down to Brazil and you express your thanks to the coffee bean farmers.
Yeah,
take it to
I do like to take things to the extreme because I do think that that's very illuminating. I mean, what's interesting is, and you know this because we've done several episodes and hopefully we'll do more of good or bad. I think the world is very gray and full of everything's got its good and bad. So I'm not very extreme in my beliefs. I'm not like, this is the only way to be. I'm actually trying to be very nuanced. But in my projects, I do take it to the extreme because I think it's very illuminating to see what works and what doesn't.
And the final part, which I think is really important, and it's important for every book and every story, is your books do have the arc of the hero. So like in the art of living biblically, I don't know if you necessarily wanted to do it in the beginning, but no one else in your life really wanted you to live biblically for a year. Like Julie, your wife, did not want you to. I don't want to say she was against it, because she wasn't. I'm sure she was very supportive, but there were aspects that were uncomfortable for her. Like whenever she was having her period, you wouldn't sit on any seat that she had sat on, because that's in the Bible.
Right. Yeah. She did not love that.
But you get this call to action, which is you're inspired by something to live this high stakes concept of the extreme. You meet enemies and allies along the way. Like, you know, you meet people, like I'm sure you met rabbis and priests who helped you explain, you know, live biblically, but you also met an adulterer who you had to stone.
That's true.
You know, see, and you confront bigger and bigger problems at these extremes, you know, like the problem with Julie, the problem with the adulterer. And then finally, the end of every arc of the hero is you return to share the knowledge.
I love it. I don't know.
This is the 4-step PJ process for a bestseller.
I love you. You've cracked the code. But yeah, no, I enjoy, and luckily, like Odysseus, my wife was still waiting for me at the end, which may not always be the case. But
what would be another concept that you haven't done that someone listening could say, "Oh, I'm going to do the AJ process and I'm going to make a bestseller"? Like, what would be another high stakes?
Oh, well, there are tons that I have not done, but that I've been suggested to or have thought about. One is that a lot of people suggest that I should become the greatest lover in the world and do all the positions in the Kama Sutra. And I
can't believe you just did that, because I was just thinking that was something you wouldn't do, but I could see someone wanting to try to do that, like the year of living by the Kama Sutra.
Right. And I would never, I mean, I actually did bring it up with my wife just to test the water. And she's like, absolutely not. Like, that sounds horrible. I agree with her. First of all, I'm too old.
This is very difficult.
Yeah, I'm not flexible enough at my age. But I think it's an interesting idea that I certainly don't want to read about myself doing it, but, you know, someone else might be fun. So there's that one. Well, another one that we talked about on the air that I started, and I may go back to it. So if you're listening, maybe don't steal it, but who knows? You know what? Go ahead.
You could go steal it. You're competing against the one and only AJ Jacobs. It's going to be very hard to steal it.
Well, I think it's an interesting idea. It was just overwhelming for me, and I couldn't wrap my mind about how to do it exactly. But it was about the post-truth crisis. How do we know what we know? And so I was going to try to fact check everything in my life. How do I know that the world is round? How do I know that Julie, my wife, loves me? You know, she says she does, but I'm not in her mind. So it was trying to fact check everything. That's
a real question, because there's a lot of things we think we know or we take for granted that we know just because we've heard it over and over again. But like, if you asked me to tell you proof to you right now that the world is round, there's no way I could do it. Like, to me, just from if I go outside on the street, the world looks pretty flat to me. Like, yeah, I can't see past the horizon, but I don't know why that is. Maybe it's too far away to see. So I wouldn't be able to tell you why. It would be easier for you to prove to me the world is flat than that the world is round.
Right. And there are experiments. I mean, there's a great documentary, actually, if people want to see it, about the flat earthers and how they did an experiment to try to prove that the world was flat, and it didn't work. And I'm sure they blamed it on the CIA or something. They had some excuse why it didn't work. But it is hard. It is hard. I mean, most of our knowledge is based on secondhand that we get from experts. So the key is which experts do we trust? And that is something that's a very profound problem. And I think that's gotten into a huge mess, because a lot of people are trusting, you know, Alex Jones instead of a legitimate scientist. So
but that's even like a nuance too, because okay, Alex Jones is an extreme, but like scientists disagree with each other all the time.
Right.
I mean,
no, there's
very few things that are established science. Like we're seeing from the James Webb Telescope, all our theories about how the universe began are probably wrong. There probably wasn't a big bang where the universe began.
Right.
Or if there was one, there was something before then as well. Like there was no beginning of the universe is what they're theorizing now.
Well, the basic rule of thumb I use, and it's not perfect, but it's sort of the Rotten Tomatoes view of science. Because, yeah, you are going to get on any topic, you can get a scientist to say, oh, yeah, bacon is the healthiest thing in the world. Bacon is better than broccoli. But you have to look at all of the scientists and say, what are the vast majority saying? Now, again, not foolproof, because the vast majority said that the sun circled around the earth. But it's better than nothing.
Well, every scientific discovery, right before the discovery, the vast majority of scientists don't believe it.
Right. And that is I actually think that is a feature, not a bug of science, is that
right.
It's all about changing your mind according to evidence. So a great scientist will let go of a hypothesis when they see the evidence against it, even if it's something that they've believed and invested in all of their life. So that's good. That is a good thing about science.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the question there really is, how often does it happen? So it's very easy for me to say, oh, every great scientific discovery happens the second after 99% of scientists disagree with it. But how often does that really happen? If you take all of the things that scientists believe, it's a very rare, small number of things that they have to all suddenly switch. You know, for instance, washing hands wasn't considered healthy until germ theory was proven in the 1800s, you know, Igor Semmelweis.
Right.
So, but that might be a small, in all of the things that science has proven over the years, that might be a tiny thing, you know, just one thing of millions. So we don't know.
Well, I do. Yeah. I mean, first of all, germ theory is one of the greatest things that ever happened to humans. And I guess it's so counterintuitive because you can't see the germs. It sounds like magic. Oh yeah, they're these invisible tiny animals that are all crawling around your hands and you can get them off with some soap. That seems crazy talk. So you do have to have this. I remember, who was it? What's the name? Carl Sagan had a great quote about science where you have to have an open mind to realize that sometimes the weirdest, craziest things are true, that nature can be very weird. But at the same time, you have to have the highest level of skepticism when you're confronted with a new idea. And you have to make sure that it passes all of the evidentiary tests. So it's a balance between having this crazy open mind and being really skeptical.
Yeah, I agree. So okay, so the year of living truthfully or fact checking, very difficult.
I mean, it's bad. It's important. It's an important thing. So how often, let me ask you this though, how often have you started a book and like I did that for 3 months. Have you ever started something and written for 2 months and then like said, this is not, or do you vet it so well in the beginning that you've never had that problem?
I've had it with fiction where I would start like writing a novel and I would write for 2 months or 3 months or longer. And then I just wouldn't feel it anymore and I would stop it.
Have you written a novel?
With nonfiction, because I have a different style than you, I write what I consider stories about myself where I'm struggling with something very personal and this is my story through this personal. So the story already exists. I don't have to like live the story. I've already lived it. And I've concluded this is a story that other people will relate to, like let's say going broke, for instance. And that's how I vet. That's sort of, it's not quite vetting, but that's how I write a story. And then there's always a story there. I could always write those books.
Right. So you're telling me you don't go broke multiple times on purpose. That is actually
right. The year of going broke. I'm going to spend the next year losing, not even spending, just losing all of my money. Probably if I tried to lose all my money, that would be the best way to make money.
There you go. It would be like a producer's type thing.
So what is another thing that's a broad general thing? Well, there's the kind of George Costanza, the year of doing the opposite of everything I would normally do. Or have you ever seen this novel, The Dice Man?
I love The Dice Man. In fact, a friend of mine is very into diceology. Like, he does it with his life. Like, he'll say, him and his wife will say, if we roll a 1, we're going to go to vacation in Mexico. If we roll a 2, we're going to go to Duluth, Minnesota. If we roll a 3, we'll go to Bulgaria. And they live by the die.
What about though, how do they determine what questions to ask? Like, do they wake up every day and say, if we roll, heads we divorce, tails we stay together another day?
Right. Well, that is the big question. And that's what happened in the fictional version.
Yes.
The Dice Man, because he went to super dark place. Like, he became a murderer and just a horrible person because the die told him to. So yeah, it's a very dangerous, in that sense, you've got to be very careful what you ask. But he loves it because it adds the spontaneity to their life, and they do things that they would never have done normally. And I think, it's something to consider. His name is Kieran Harris. He wrote about it. If you Google Kieran Harris and Dice Man, I think it'll pop up.
Oh, it's funny because I know other people who are obsessed with this book. Like, I know one guy who tried to produce it as a movie. He even met with the author, and I don't know, he never went through. But it's a fascinating book.
What about going meta and you would roll a die? Like, if it's 1, I'm going to put all my money into making a movie. If it's 2, I'm going to kill the author. Whatever, something like that.
Or I'm going to write a book about living the year of living like the Dice Man.
Dicily, yeah. I know. Yeah. It is. I think it's a very interesting life hack. I haven't really explored it myself, but I like the idea.
So someone's already written something in similar style to you, the year of living like Oprah. So they followed all of Oprah's recommendations for a year.
I remember that. Exactly.
That was a good idea, and that was a bestseller. So by the way, we're recommending The Dice Man. This is a podcast about recommendations going into the new year.
I came up with a bunch of recommendations. I gave it some thought. So
let's hear one. But I am fascinated by the idea of what other concepts fit the A.J. Jacobs process. We've determined the year of living like the Dice Man and the year of living by the Kama Sutra.
Right.
What about you're a Democrat, I know that, and I'm sure you're not ashamed to admit it. What about the year of living like a Republican?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, I have seen articles where liberals swear to watch nothing but Fox News for a week, and so I've seen that, but I've never seen a year of it. So
it's so funny. It's so hard for people who are very polarized. Like, I could watch any news channel for a week, but for them, it's like a life staking challenge to watch TV channel for a week. Like, I could watch Animal Planet for a week and I wouldn't care. And I hate animals.
That's right. I forgot. You wouldn't. Well, let me tell you, actually, that is my first recommendation is this app called Ground News. Do you know it? Ground News?
No.
Well, they have, if you sign up for it, Ground, Ground. I think it's a subscription. It's it's like $1 a month or something. But they have this feature called Blind Spot, and they will tell you these news stories and tell you whether it's being covered by the liberal media or the conservative media. So,
that's fascinating. That reminds me of there's a newsletter called The Flip Side, which takes an issue and it tries to be as neutral as possible. Tells you let's call it the blue side and the red side, and tries to be completely neutral. Just gives us, it's steel man's both sides.
Oh, I'm going to get that. Well, this one, look, this is 76% the right media covered. Apparently, Shark Week lacks diversity, overrepresents men named Mike, scientists say. So that is a big theme in right-wing media, I've noticed, is they love when wokeism goes crazy. So people complaining about diversity in Shark Week is just right up their alley. And then
how do they determine something is newsworthy? Like maybe it's quite correct. Oh, they're looking at things that are covered by one side, but not the other.
Right, exactly. So, like AOC is under investigation by House Ethics Committee. That's 61% right-wing media, 18% left-wing media, and 21% center. So they take all of the media and they divide it into whether they think it's predominantly left, predominantly right, or centrist, and then they see how many different sources are covering the particular story. So,
and here's one: FDA clears updated COVID vaccines for kids under age 5. So that's being covered by the left, 63%, 0% by the right. And here's the reverse. There's the White House responds to criticism of Griner prisoner deal. The left, 18%, the right, 64%. So this is fascinating, actually. Ground news. Yeah, I like this.
Yeah, there were all these stories that, since I read mostly, the New York Times and NPR, which are traditionally sort of slightly left. Yeah, they were like, I didn't know there was a big thing about Biden and building something at his house in Delaware. That was a big deal. I don't know. It was a scandal. I didn't pay attention to it, and I don't think it was a genuine scandal. But again, I should look into it more. But it was just nothing in the left-wing media about it.
Oh, wait, this one's fascinating, and it's related to you, actually, in the ground news. So you went to Brown University, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I saw that. That was interesting, yeah.
Brown becomes first Ivy League institution to ban caste discrimination. Is there actually caste discrimination? Is that a common thing at, like, colleges?
Well, I will tell you, I actually thought, I read one article on it, and I thought it was a good thing overall, because apparently there are a lot of Indian students, and according to this article at least, there elements of Indian society still, it's officially illegal to have a caste system in India, but apparently there is still a lot of discrimination, that the untouchables are still discriminated against. So I say, why not? Like, if you're going to, if you're going to talk about different types of discrimination, let's get them all out there. I would go even further. I'd say, like, discrimination against ugly people. That gets so little coverage. But that
God damn it! What we gotta get rid of discrimination against ugly people. I need to start having success in life.
By the way, that dovetails into another one of my recommendations.
Facial transplants.
How did you know? I love them. No, it was, hold on, here it is. Okay, yeah, it was I've started to watch a little more stand-up comedy, partly influenced by you. And there, have you ever
very happy about that.
What?
I'm happy I influenced you in that.
Yeah. Do you know Romesh Ranganathan? You ever hear of him?
No, Romesh.
Romesh. He's a British comedian, but I watched his Netflix special, hilarious, and I tried to find like a couple of examples. And here's an example. I'm sure it'd be funnier if he says it, but he says, "I'm an unattractive man, but I have not gotten unattractive as I've got older. I've always looked terrible. So what that means is I'm liberated from the aging process because I'm never going to look worse. My life cycle looks like this. Look like shit, look like shit, look like shit, dead." I'm like, that's nice.
He's not a bad looking guy, I don't think.
No, well, yeah, self-deprecation is good for comedy. But
yeah, okay, go ahead.
I think he's very funny. I'm a fan. So Romesh Ranganathan, if you like stand-up comedy, check that out on Netflix.
And I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I'm going to recommend this to you. A counter one is watch the YouTube comedy special Jew by Ari Shafir.
Okay.
You will die laughing. I swear to God, you will die laughing.
Writing it down. Writing it down. That's a good one. Oh, wait, I got another good one for you. Which is Askhole. You ever hear of Askhole?
No.
Askhole. So this is, like those conversation starters, like those cards like you might have at the dinner table, like, if you were a type of tree, what kind of tree would you be? So this is kind of like that, but really inappropriate questions. Not always inappropriate. Some of them are like truly offensive. And I have a high tolerance for offend, and some of them are too spicy for me. But
one? Well, I'm looking at this site right now. This is insane. Well, what's one that's too offensive for you?
Well, I can't even say it because then someone will like clip it. You can say it, but I'll say ones that I actually thought were very thought-provoking. One was, of all the beliefs you hold, what will be considered barbaric in 150 years? So I love to think about that one. And
that is a good one.
Oh,
but
yeah.
here's one. Oh, okay. So I'll answer that question. So what do I do now that would be considered barbaric?
Yeah.
I don't know, actually.
Well,
maybe using toilet paper.
Great one. That is gross. Yeah. Why would you do that? Everyone will have a bidet. Everyone will have a bidet.
Yeah, a bidet or some kind of like, invisible radiation thing that doesn't harm you, but like perfectly cleans you.
Yeah, I was thinking more like moral, as opposed to like disgusting. More like,
okay, on a moral level. I mean, moral's hard because there are not a lot of things. I mean, there are a lot of things that are really bad and a lot of things that are really good. But most of the day, you're just doing your routine in your house or at your job. So you don't really have a chance to be moral or amoral, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I'm like, what do you do that you think is ever amoral?
Well, it's more like, I mean, the most common answer I've heard to this is meat eating, that people will be like, I can't believe you ate animal. But it could also be euthanasia, like keeping people alive who are in incredible pain. I think that's going to be like, what the hell were you thinking? These people wanted to die and you're forcing them to live? Another one.
But you're thinking about societal things. Like, what's something that you do that 100 years, well, I guess eating meat you do. Right. And that might be considered barbaric. I don't think that will be considered barbaric, but then in 100 years, everyone's going to be eating stem cell grown meat. So nobody's going to have to kill an animal.
Which I'm very excited about. Like that is one of the few times where like a moral issue will just disappear. I hope. Fingers crossed. Well, one thing is I have a housekeeper, and I think when, we have Roombas now, but I imagine in like 50 years, we'll have super Roombas who will just like walk through the house and clean, like Rosie the maid, and people will look back and be like, there was a time where you hired someone to clean your toilet? Like, that's pretty terrible. So,
but let me ask you a question. Like it's also barbaric the reverse, because what does Rosie the maid do now for a living? Like, you would rather have a Roomba than give someone a job to feed her family?
Well, it's all the question of, that's the big question about jobs that are unglamorous and a lot of people find horrible. Like, there's always pushback when a job is automated. The question is, in the future, if all of the really unpleasant jobs are automated, is that a better world? I think it will be. Like, you'll find meaning in other things. You'll find meaning.
Yeah.
But I do remember I love to read old newspapers, and I was reading one from like, I think it was the 1910s, and it was about the invention of the automatic bowling pin taker-upper clearer, because they used to have kids, like 14, 15-year-old kids who would take the bowling pins and set them up, and it was a crap job because people would intentionally try to hit the bowling pin boys. Like, that was the game. Like how when I go to a golf range, I try to hit the truck that's trying to get the balls. Like people would just love to break the legs of these poor kids. But they were freaking out. They're like, I can't believe you're going to replace us with a pin, with a machine. I want to be out there getting slammed in the leg by these bowling balls. It's my right. So I always think of that when I think of sort of pushback to automation.
Here's, in terms of like which ones I feel like I wouldn't be able to answer for these Askhole questions are very interesting. So like if I was asked at a dinner party, if here's one of the questions, if everyone in the room were arranged on a spectrum of attractiveness, which two people would you be between? I would feel very uncomfortable answering that. As opposed to, by the way, and there's another one which I wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Well, maybe I would answering. If you had to fuck a cow, would you rather be dead or alive?
Well, that one I don't. I'm happy to answer that one.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a joke question, whereas the other one, everyone's going to be personally affected by your answer.
Well, I think there's some interesting ethical issues in having sex with a cow. Like,
but if you had to, that removes the ethical issue.
Right. Yes, you wouldn't do it. I mean, hopefully most people wouldn't do it voluntarily. But I would say, it all depends on whether the cow would find this something that it would be pleasurable, which is a very hard thing to figure out. But
okay, but that's would you, F a cow? Like but you have to, and right. Your only choice is like there's a gun to your head. Your only choice is dead or alive. You're allowed to say one word.
If somehow we could figure out whether the cow would find it pleasurable, then I would go with the live cow, because then I could, at least be providing some happiness to someone.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So then in that case,
if it doesn't, if it's like, get away from me, you're not my type, then I would go with the dead.
So your answer depends on whether you would put the needs of the cow before your own needs. I'm trying
to be a nice guy and think of the cow's needs as well as mine. Because I'm kind of agnostic as to having sex with a dead or live cow. It seems to me about as unpleasant either way.
Yes.
So where would you fall on that question?
Well, I did not think of, to your credit, I did not think of the nuance of whether the cow would enjoy it. Like, of course the cow's going to enjoy it. That's what I'm thinking. So, and then if the cow enjoys it and you have to, okay, I wouldn't normally, but if you have to, the gun to your head, there's a musket to your head and it's loaded. I would certainly choose alive because the dead has like more bacteria. Good point. There's a lot of, you could get sick maybe from, it's a hygienic question.
See, look at all of the interesting ideas that this sparks.
Yeah, depending on whether there's a spectrum of ethics, there's a spectrum of hygiene, there's a spectrum of pleasure. So so Askhole, this is really great. I've never heard of this. By the way, you like reading newspapers from, old newspapers. Have you ever been to newspapers.com?
Oh yeah, no, I'm a subscriber. I love it.
Me too. I like reading old newspapers too, and you could find the craziest things in old newspapers.
Yeah, I know. I love it. Like, do you have any that you have?
This is an interesting one. Everyone always says, like, including for these midterms, but like definitely for 2020, everyone was telling me this is the most important election ever. So I looked at newspapers.com and I looked up every election all the way back to as far as I could find, which was about 1824. And every single presidential election, somebody said this is the most important election ever. Now they could all be right, because in 1828 maybe the election was more important than 1824 and so on. But it's just odd that that's like a catchphrase people use all the time.
Right. Yeah, I keep a little file of, I'll like read old newspapers. Here's one, for instance. I think this is from like 1904. It says, whistling for half an hour after meal is the best possible aid to digestion. Try it, weak-chested, slender-throated sisters, and profit by my experience, said Mrs. Alice Shaw of whistling fame. It's like, What the hell?
All right.
That
That is definitely the whistle diet plan. Now this is like a business idea now.
exactly.
You can find ancient business models from like 1910 and turn them into actual models now.
Good. That is good. All right. So that was that. Wait.
You know, by the way,
What?
it makes a little bit of sense, and I'll tell you why. The whistle diet makes sense.
Right.
Well, this is me making a pseudoscientific argument for it.
All right.
I know that this science doesn't work, but I will explain it scientifically. So when you're whistling, you're probably expelling more breath than taking in, which is why people get tired after they whistle for 3 straight minutes. They need to breathe.
Right.
And we all know that if you eat no carbs, you'll probably lose weight faster than if you eat a lot of carbs. So whistling expels more carbon from your body. So if you do it right after you eat, it's as if you're expelling all the carbs you just ate. So it's a low carbon version of the no carb diet.
You heard it. Dr. Altucher. You heard it here.
I am a scientist on Twitter.
That is flawless. Well, I will say, all right, let me try to defend whistling, which would be, everyone loves meditation now, and it's all about being aware of your breath. And whistling is sort of meditation with a little pleasant noise. That's my argument.
All right. Is meditating good for diet though?
I'm sure you could make
Buddha
an
is
argument.
pretty heavy in a lot of cultures.
Oh, that is true. I have noticed that. Well, but you know why? Because he loves the joy of eating. So, I feel that is a Buddhist thing, to enjoy eating.
It's either enjoy eating or not caring about gaining weight. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's true.
The body, you're not really your body in Buddhism.
I like that. All right, here's one. Well, what do you think of stretchy belts? Do you wear belts?
I do not wear a belt, no.
Oh, you don't? Well,
You know why? Because I don't tuck my shirt in ever.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't tuck your shirt in and you wear a belt, it looks like this bulky bulge on your stomach.
Interesting.
Because your shirt is over the belt.
But the pants don't fall down? You don't feel the need for some sort of support?
Sometimes, but then I buy tighter pants then.
See, I hate tight pants. That's the difference.
I don't wear like tight pants, but or maybe I'm just like, I'm thicker around the waist than I am around the legs, so the pants don't fall down.
All right. Well, stretchy belts, that's my suggestion to those who do wear belts. Beltology.com. I have
stretchy belt. All right.
Oh, you know which one I like is, I got this from my Constitution, but I'm allowed to talk about it because I don't think it's directly the Constitution. But I've been reading a lot of the Founding Father, and Ben Franklin, who I think is my favorite Founding Father, he has lots of life advice, and one of them is like, he's very into organizing his day hour by hour, which I like to do now as well. And he also said at the beginning of the day, you should ask yourself, what good can I do today? And at the end of the day, you say, what good was I able to do, if any? And I think that's great, because I now do that every morning. I'm like, what good because that gives it gives me like a moral compass. Like,
that is really good. But let me ask you a question. Let's say you really wanted today to get better at tennis, and so you spent the whole day practicing tennis. Would that count as good, or you'd have to do something else to be good?
I think that I use it in a very liberal way. So I think improving something about yourself still counts as good. So even if you're not improving the world, you're still like, what good am I going to do today? I'm going to try to get better. I'm going to try to gain a skill and get better at tennis.
I love that viewpoint, because what you're saying is basically the world is better if you played tennis all day as opposed to smoking crack all day.
Right. Although I'm sure you can make the argument like, I am going to get better at smoking crack. But I think in general, yes, I agree with you.
Well, but getting better at smoking crack most 97.8% of scientists would say that getting better at smoking crack is not healthy for you.
Agree. So I think, I think we can come down on that playing tennis is better from a moral standpoint than smoking crack. I like it. I think we've come to an important conclusion.
Yes. If anything, we've just did some good today, which is we've convinced people to get better at tennis. All those people who were trying to get better at smoking crack, now we've convinced them to get better at playing tennis.
There you go.
And I have a big audience of that. You know, I did once interview, actually, did I do this I did it at the second year of a conference you and I once attended, the Mastermind Talks conference.
Yeah.
But I interviewed Rick Ross, not the rapper Freeway Rick Ross. Freeway Rick Ross's nickname is named after the real Rick Ross, who was the largest crack dealer ever. And he did most of his crack dealing in the 80s. And he didn't know he was kind of in the middle of the whole Iran-Contra thing. But I did interview the largest, for this podcast, the largest crack dealer.
Wow. Do you remember any takeaways?
Yeah, I remembered he was really, really polite. Very, very polite person. B, I remember that he delegated so well that even 2 levels below him, nobody knew who he was. Like the police had no photos of him, so they were never able to catch him, until many, many years of looking for him. That there was nobody who knew who he was, even though he was the top of this huge pyramid of crack dealers.
Right.
And the other thing I remember is that I'm not 100% sure of this, I don't think he could read. Like, we had a menu at lunch and I was sitting next to him because we were talking about the interview, and he said he was having a hard time seeing that day or something like that. I forgot exactly what he said, but he asked me to read the menu to him.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Fascinating.
And then a few years later, I think he did get caught again for selling crack, but I don't know what happened. I know he's fine. He's not in jail, so he probably wasn't guilty of anything, but I just heard some story that he was involved again in something. Yeah, but anyway, he was a very nice guy. I liked him.
Have you interviewed people who then later turned out to be criminals? Or, like, I know we don't know if Sam Bankman-Fried did anything illegal yet, so I don't think he would count. But did you ever interview him, for instance?
I've never interviewed him, although they did reach out at one point a few months ago and asked if I wanted to interview him. And we responded, yes. And then they said, well, would you want to interview the president of FTX instead, who was another guy? And it just didn't work out. I wanted to interview him. Right. But so I could have answered yes to your question if I had interviewed him. But I'm trying to think. Jay, maybe you know this. Is there anyone we've interviewed?
Yep, there's one. Remember, I think he's sort of your friends. I don't know if you consider him a friend. Maybe you are. We interviewed him twice. No, you interviewed him twice, and then you found out from newspaper that most of his.
Oh yeah. I don't want to say his name. We did interview somebody who turned out to be a classic fraud, and it was really a shock. Like, I've encountered people like that a few times, including Bernie Madoff, who I knew beforehand, and then but this one was actually like a good friend of mine, and he turned out to be everything he's ever told me was a lie.
That is crazy.
And it was just so weird.
Wait, can we go back to the Bernie Madoff thing for 1 second? What do you remember from your meeting him?
That he was very, very nice to me. Seemed like a very fatherly, mentorly sort of person, almost like he wanted to mentor me.
Wow.
And he seemed very concerned about, his responsibilities towards his customers. And so it's like, and the whole thing is like, okay, it's so funny too, but here's the thing I remember the most is that when I was going to meet him, a lot of people called me and said, hey, can you put in a good word for us? We'd love to invest with him, but he doesn't really take new investors often.
Wow.
And each one of these people, it was more than one. And each one of these people, I called them after the whole fraud was exposed, and they all denied that they called me. And I said, I know 100% for sure that you called me and asked me this. It's 100% chance. Like I see your phone number on my phone. And they're like, no, it's impossible. In fact, they wouldn't even want to, they said, we knew he was a fraud then. So why would we call you?
Right.
And everyone said afterwards they knew he was a fraud, but nobody knew he was a fraud. I mean, maybe one guy did, and that guy was ostracized by everyone.
Right.
That guy became famous for being ostracized for it.
And let me ask you a question. Do you think that those people believed what they were saying, or they were just covering their butt?
I think they roughly believed it. I think maybe they didn't remember, and that I don't think they maliciously believed it. I don't think they like, oh, well, I knew all the time. I think they were like, did I know or not? I probably knew. Right. And then they doubled down on that belief.
I think we are so good at rationalizing. Like, I am sure that, 50% of my memories are just totally fabricated and self-serving.
No, but I think that's part of what makes a good writer, which is knowing what you don't know. Because I could, one of the first signs when I'm reading a book, I could tell if someone's a good writer or not, is if there's a lot of ego in the words. Right. And like, I knew this, I knew that, that's kind of an ego. Like, you have to be a good writer, you kind of have to show that you're coming back from something that was incorrect. Right. So you can't be right about everything. You can't start off writing from a point of view that you know everything.
Well, that is it. I will tell you, that was another idea that I discussed and I decided not to do, but it's still an interesting idea. It was basically about just what we were talking about, how we have terrible memories. So it would be almost like an autobiography, but written as if I were Robert Caro of myself. So I would go out and interview all of these people about myself. And maybe I wear a disguise, like a fake mustache, and be like, I'm writing a biography of A.J. Jacobs. What do you remember? And see how their memories matched up with mine, because I'm sure many of them are totally different. And try to write almost a biography of myself.
The only problem with that is that a lot of times people will only say nice things because they don't want to get back to you. Even if your fake you promises that, oh, it's never going to get back to AJ and I'll keep you anonymous, people will probably only say good things.
Interesting. Right.
Because one time, Stephen Dubner was going to write an article about me. This was before pre-Freakonomics. He was going to write an article about the psychology of money and focus it on me. And so he called a lot of people who knew me, and everybody, or at least according to Stephen, everybody said something favorable, when I'm sure they wouldn't have said something favorable if they thought there was any chance they could get back to me. And the interesting thing is he decided not to write that article, and instead he focused on, for the psychology of money, he focused on the topic which became Freakonomics.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So fortunately, he did not write about me. Fortunately for him, he did not write about me. And
yeah, you could have been that's interesting.
He sent me the article though, and it was a good article, but he never published it.
That's good. Well, yeah, I mean, that is a shame that sometimes, a lot of times, the publications don't want it if it's just too positive. If it's like, hey, here's a great guy, they're like, who cares? I want to read about Madoff.
Yeah. No, but he ended up writing about, what's his co-author's name on Freakonomics? I forget
Stephen
now.
Levitt.
Yeah, see, he wrote about Stephen Levitt instead of me, who also is a much better human being than me. So
I disagree.
So rightfully deserved he wrote about Stephen Levitt instead of me. But so what's another recommendation you have? All these are so creative.
Well, I wrote a book about puzzles, which I talked about on your delightful show. So
yes,
there are.
So I recommend that, but what puzzles specifically would you recommend?
My recommendation is, I actually was not a big fan of jigsaws because I thought they were kind of like, I was snobby. I was snobby about it. But you were an elitist. I was an elitist. But there are some brilliant jigsaw puzzles. And two companies come to mind, Stave and Liberty Puzzles. They both have woodcut puzzles. Stave, they're cut by hand. Liberty, they're cheaper. Stave is super expensive. They're like Bill Gates's favorite puzzle company. So, because, they like go up to thousands of dollars. Liberty's a little cheaper. But they both have these super tricky, they have pieces in the shape, they could be dolphins. They could be in the shape of a wheelbarrow. Sometimes with Stave especially, the guy who started it calls himself Chief Tormentor in Chief. And he just likes to mess with you. He'll put in pieces from other puzzles into the box just to drive you crazy. He'll have pieces that are too big or too small. So if you like some level of masochism, then these really are some great puzzles to try.
Oh my God, I'm at the website right now, and these are beautiful puzzles.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. They're like painted, and they are hand. The ones on Stave are hand. I went to their headquarters, and there's 6 people on what look like mutant sewing machines just all day, and they don't have a plan. They're just driven by the muse. So they will create no 2 puzzles are alike.
And you know what? The most difficult ones, so they rank them by puzzle difficulty. And I'm at the Tormentor level, and they're cheaper than the other ones. It's interesting.
Oh.
And actually it's interesting because there's holes in them, these puzzles. They're not like, so now I'm going to go to the traditional puzzles, and there are some, you're right. There's like a $5,000 puzzle here.
Yeah. No, I did one for my book that was called Olivia that he calls it a bitch of a puzzle. He says it's a real, and he won't sell it to you unless you earn it. You have to get through the lower puzzles before and it's so hard because partly there are 10,000 different ways you can arrange the pieces, but only one of them is the proper arrangement. So it is super crazy.
Oh my God. I just found this. Maybe this is his most expensive puzzle, Stavely Manor, and it's $7,000.
They lent them to me, thank God, because I couldn't afford to buy them as research. So I love them. But the good thing is, a lot of people buy them like, how like you have I don't have this, but if you go in with 20 other people and then you can pass it around.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I never heard of them. What other kinds of puzzles did you really start enjoying in your book? Well, while you were doing the book, The Puzzler.
Well, thank you for mentioning it by name. Japanese puzzle boxes. I don't know if we talked about that, but I knew nothing about them. But they are a huge obsession. There's like a whole cult of people who love them. And these are boxes. They started in Japan. They can range in size from the size, like a necklace box all the way up to a air conditioner box. And they're made of beautiful wood, different kinds of wood, patterns. And the puzzle is to open them up. And there's sometimes a little surprise inside, but really the fun is opening them. And there are all these, you can move little panels, you can spin them, sometimes you have to freeze them. There are all of these creative ways that they mess with you. And there's actually a guy, if you want to look at it before you think about buying them, there's a guy named Chris Ramsey on YouTube who has millions of subscribers. And all he does is he opens these boxes and films himself trying to open these boxes and cursing and screaming. And
I'm not sure I understand, you have a box in front of you, but there's no obvious way to open it, is the thing?
Yeah, sometimes. And actually it was featured in The Glass Onion, which I know Jay saw. I don't know if you've seen it, the new one from the Knives Out guy. It starts with a puzzle box. So yeah, there's no openings, and you have to just mess with it for 15 minutes before something, oh look, if I push this tab this way and I push this up that way, then that opens this, and then that drawer opens that. And so yeah, I suck at them because I am not a very spatial I'm not a good spatial reason. You would probably be great at them because I know chess, I think, requires some spatial reasoning. Would you agree or not?
Yeah, maybe. But these look pretty hard. I'm looking at the website right now. Okay, Japanese puzzle boxes. And I always keep thinking, because you've established this brand as an expert on puzzles, because you wrote a book called The Puzzler, you should make your own puzzle books now. Like The Puzzler Presents, 100 crazy Sudoku puzzles. The Puzzler Presents, 100 crazy X.
I know. Well, it's funny. I went to this weekend puzzle conference, and Will Shorts was there, who's in the book, and he's a great guy. And he was funny because
he's on my podcast.
Oh, he's been on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we got to sell our books at the conference, and I just brought my book. That was it, my one book. I mean, I have others, but I brought the puzzle book. He had like a table the size of like the Citizen Kane table because I asked him, how many books have you written? He's like, I've written or edited about 1,000. I'm like, oh my God, he's a genius. I mean, because a lot of these he doesn't even, have to work for more than 10 minutes. He
doesn't make the Sudoku puzzles. Like, you can have a computer generate them.
Right.
It's just his brand is so good. Like, and to be fair, he's a good curator of puzzles. That's what he's done his whole life. So he can pick the Sudoku puzzles that are interesting to him, and then he makes a book, or crossword puzzles, or millions of different kinds of puzzles that he does. And I could see how he could write over 1,000 books. And just think, that's a steady stream of income from each book. Even if it's just averages $10 per book, that's $10,000 a month. That's a living. So you should.
I know. I got to get on it. You are always telling me to be a better businessman, and I got.
You should have done that with the family tree stuff. I had lots of ideas for your family tree stuff.
I know.
That's such a big thing.
That's
genealogy,
why you have a business podcast and I don't. So there you go.
Yeah, but that's probably why I go broke a lot, because I try lots of different things, and then most things don't work. First rule of entrepreneurship: most things don't work.
Yeah, but some do. But some do. That's the key.
Some do. All right. Any other insightful recommendations?
Let's see.
I like all these. I'm literally going to get all of these.
All right. I love it. I love that you are.
Including Askhole.
Askhole I highly recommend. What about, TV shows? I did love the Derry Girls. You ever see that? About the Northern Ireland girls? Hilarious. So check that out. I think it's on Netflix.
I've never even heard of that. Derry Girls?
Derry, Derry. And they're a bunch of Northern Ireland teenagers in the 80s. And they have the foulest mouths. And they're, just really...
What made you watch it?
I had read good reviews. I mean, it is brilliant. It's one of my favorite shows ever. Because also you get to learn about this fascinating part of history, which was the 1990s and 80s and 90s in Northern Ireland with the terrorism and the British army. But it's hilarious at the same time, in this horrible thing. You've got, there's a character who's a nun who's just the bitchiest nun I've ever seen portrayed. Like, she's almost like Krusty the Clown. Like, she is just so horrible, but delightful. I am a big fan. Derry Girls.
Well, I have never even heard. Is it on Netflix
or Hulu? I can't remember. One of those two. Here, I'll look it up.
Do you watch Severance on Apple?
TV Plus? Weirdly, I was just thinking I gotta finish that. I watched 4 episodes and I thought it was great. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was great too. I watch a lot of TV, so I could just do a whole podcast about TV recommendations.
Interesting. Well, give me one. Give me one before you.
Well, I like sitcoms and stuff. There was a TV show, Atlanta, starring directed Donald Glover, who was Childish Gambino.
Sure.
Also, in his music life. and he also has written for the Jon Stewart Show, and he's a stand-up comedian. Such a talented guy, and this is like the weirdest, most interesting sitcom. And another one called Dave, which I think you would really like, about a Jewish guy who is out in LA and he wants to be a rapper. And
I watched a few episodes of that one, and it was hilarious, and it was so awkward. It was like Larry David, but almost like pornographic. It was like he was so. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about, but it was so.
Yes.
I had trouble like looking at the screen. It was so awkward.
And I would say season 1 was great. Like I loved season 1, but season 2 was a work of art.
Really?
Like it was beautiful television. Yeah, it was comedy, but there was a dramatic component that he learns about himself, and it's just really well done.
All right.
So I thought Dave was one of the best sitcoms ever, actually.
That was great.
And then more recently, I'm not interested in Westerns, in horses and cowboys in Montana. I don't really think much of Kevin Costner one way or the other, but put it all together, Yellowstone was a really great TV. My wife convinced me to watch.
All right. I've never seen that one either, but I actually like history, so I was more intrigued by 1923 or whatever.
Oh, which is like the sequel to the prequel, but it's a prequel to Yellowstone.
Right, exactly. And then I got
confused Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren.
Oh yeah. I got confused because there's a show called 1899 that was super popular, and I was like, "Oh, this is the one that's about cowboys." And I watched it.
No, that's 1883.
Yeah, whatever.
And 1899 is like some Jay keeps recommending 1899 to me, and I haven't watched it yet.
That one is like Titanic meets Lost. I feel that was the pitch. Titanic meets Lost.
I want to see that then, because I did not like Titanic, but I love Lost.
Can I just tell you who I think is one of the greatest villains in movie history? Is Rose from Titanic. I hate her so much because...
Tell me.
Do you know my reasoning? I might have even told you already.
No, you have not.
The Heart of the Ocean diamond, I looked it up, like, how much would it really be worth? And some gemologist estimated about, what was it? It was like $200 million. It was 20 million or 200. It's some enormous amount. And she chucks it into the water because her dead boyfriend is there. As opposed to selling it and donating 200 million to charity, where you could literally save hundreds of thousands of lives. Or
that does sound to me like the worst villain in movie history.
Thank you. I agree.
That's worse than Darth Vader.
Yeah, because Darth Vader, like wasn't. He thought he was doing good. Like he thought she was just like being thoughtless.
Yeah, so I have to interject a little bit. Like, the other reason why Rose is a villain, there's obviously enough room on the door for Jack to climb on.
Yeah, good point.
I've heard that.
Leonardo DiCaprio could still be alive today if Rose had just pulled him onto the door.
Yeah, right. It's interesting. I mean, I feel that those guys from, what's it called? Mythbusters needed to do an episode. Like, put the door in there and see if they actually will float. Because if it's true, yeah, just another reason to hate Rose.
So AJ, what's going on in your life right now? Is it just all about writing this next book? Like every day you wake up and you think, what good could I do in the world? And how can it be related to the U.S. Constitution?
Yeah, it's mostly that. It's funny because you were emailing me that you're worried that we're going to be replaced by AI. And I recently wrote an article like 2 weeks ago for The Atlantic about that, because when my book came out, I put it on Amazon. I wrote The Puzzler by A.J. Jacobs. And my book came up, but so did 6 other books and they were all called either Summary of the Puzzler by A.J. Jacobs or Workbook for the Puzzler.
I read that.
And I was like, what the hell? So I ordered them all and I kind of reviewed them, but they were all crazy talk. They were all a word salad of my book, reviews of my book, articles about my book, my book jacket text. And it was clear that it was an AI that had done it, because they would take a word and they would look for a synonym. Like, instead of calling it a barrel of monkeys, they called it a bucket of monkeys. And I was like, oh. So,
well, but here's the interesting thing though. Like, if you were to write, this is why the AJ process of writing a bestseller is so successful, because if you were to write a book about the Constitution, I bet you I can use AI to write a book almost as good as whatever book it is that you write describing the Constitution, the history, what each amendment means, blah, blah, blah. Maybe even AI could even do it better. But the thing that is not a commodity is living an interesting life. An AI cannot make up your life and make it interesting. You have to live your life and then write about it. That's your process. And so an AI will never compete with you, or quite frankly, with me, but it will compete with a lot of other writers.
Well, that's what I was just thinking. You are safe by that theory, because you write about, that's what's great about you, is you write about your successes, but also your failures. But
maybe what an AI could do though is read like all of your books and then pretend to be you, come up with an interesting, the AI can figure out the AJ process and say, I'm going to write by AJ Jacobs, the AI version of The Year of Living by the Kama Sutra, and then write it totally in AJ Jacobs style as if it were you.
I'll read it. Listen, if they can do, can I read you one thing? This was, someone sent me a GPT-3, which is the AI. They had put in, hold on, let me find it. Okay, yes. Okay, ready? This is brilliant. Like, this scared me because it's so genius. He asked the AI to write a biblical verse in the style of the King James Bible, explaining how to remove a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR. So that was what he chose. And by the way, my printer is going crazy, so I hope that's not distracting. So here's what the AI came up with. I won't read, I'll just read a couple sentences. And it came to pass that a man was troubled by a peanut butter sandwich, for it had been placed within his VCR, and he knew not how to remove it. And he cried out to the Lord, saying, "O Lord, how can I remove this sandwich from my VCR? For it is stuck fast and will not budge." And it goes on, and it's genius. It's like, it's beautiful. And this was all done by an AI.
The AI is really good. You know, I made this site where people could write their 10 ideas a day down. You know, something I recommend in Choose Yourself, and it's a practice that I do. And so this site's called Notepad, NOTEPD.com.
Yeah.
And we have an AI attached to it, and you're allowed to, you know, if you want to, you could, if you're making an idea list, 10 ideas for AJ, I'll write the ideas, and then I can click a button, have the AI come up with 10 more ideas, and it comes up with like great stuff. Like, the AI is better than ever now. It's incredible.
Do you remember anything in particular that it came up with?
Yeah, there's one that I wish I have to find it. Hold on one second. No, I can't find it.
No.
Some other show I'll find it and read it, and I'll send it to you when I find it.
Would love it. Now, but
it was very funny.
Yeah, they are scary good. Now I do. As part of my living constitutionally, I am taking fife lessons. And unfortunately, I have a fife lesson right now over Zoom.
What's a fife? Is that like a flute?
Yeah, but it's the fife and drum. It's what the colonists used during the Revolution. It was actually used in battle to tell people. It was almost like a radio. The first, it was like one tune would mean attack to the left, and another tune would mean attack to the right, retreat. So yeah, I'm trying to master the fife, but so I have to go fifing, but
well, enjoy. And I found the idea.
Oh, good. Let me hear.
All right. So the idea list was the podcast family tree. I was thinking of you. The podcast family tree. which is for each, I'm trying to remember what it's like for each, it's a business idea. So like you've been on my podcast, so you're like, you would be like a child of mine on the podcast family tree.
Yeah.
And like you've been on Tim Ferriss's and I've been on Tim Ferriss's. So we're also like podcast brothers or cousins. Yeah. So that was just what I fed the AI, come up with ideas for the podcast family tree. So it has no idea what I'm talking about because that's not specific enough. So the AI generated idea was the family tree of bad ideas. And the description of that it came up with was how capitalism is ruining our planet. In this podcast, we explore how capitalism is ruining our planet. We trace its origins back to its creator and see how it has spawned a new generation of terrible ideas.
Good listen.
So AI is quietly a communist that wants to bring down capitalism.
Interesting. Even though I feel that it would not have existed without capitalism. So
definitely not.
Yeah.
Nothing would exist without it.
Fascinating.
So,
well, that was awesome. And I, of course, recommend the James Altucher Show is my #1 recommendation to everyone. Thank
you very much. I recommend all of your books, which I think I've stated repeatedly in this. And AJ, thanks once again. And I look forward to we'll schedule a good or bad. We'll do a bunch of good or bads.
I would love it. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Enjoy the fight lesson.
Happy holiday. Oh, thank you.